It's very easy to see why Paul George was a high-level prospect just based off of his athleticism. There aren't a lot of 6'7", 6'8" wings who are routinely creating half-court dunks for themselves, and George was doing that. He had the ridiculous burst to blow by every given angle, and even in these 1v1 straight isolation situations, slower players truly had no chance against him. George was a truly absurd athlete with his speed, explosiveness, bend. Look at how low he gets on this drive. This is something I talk about plenty on the channel, the ability to generate leverage, to bring your torso parallel to the ground, and that really helped a guy like Paul George create advantages going downhill. Again, we see the kind of ridiculous bend here. He draws a foul here against Kawhi Leonard, just for shits, but look at the crazy body position. He's like at a 45-degree angle with the ground right here, maintains his balance, hops on 2 feet, and draws the foul. Like, Paul George was a crazy athlete. We all know that. But I read a lot of scouting reports, or not a lot, maybe like 3 or 4 scouting reports on Paul George before the 2020 draft, and most of them cited his lack of creation juice, on-ball scoring stuff as the reason he was a mid-first prospect instead of like an elite one. And I know we have the benefit of hindsight, but like I think that's a crazy opinion based on what the tape was like. So let's talk about Paul George as a prospect. If you're into the throwback scouting, like, comment, subscribe, always super helpful. But I was pretty blown away by PG's handle, and I came to a similar conclusion that I did for Jaylen Brown when I did a prospect analysis on him a couple years ago, is that these guys who end up developing into like special wing creators probably have more of it at the early stages than people think, where George could like string together moves and then use his explosiveness, and of course because he had the crazy athleticism that helped him excel as a handler, but George had the kind of gliding athleticism to be able to get to every spot on the court that he wanted. Nice hedge here in the pick and roll, but George keeps his dribble alive, and look how much ground he covers, like with one dribble, basically getting all the way down into the paint and finishing strong right there. But yeah, I think Paul George's actual ball handling was a bit better than he was generally given credit for. We'll get to that in a little bit. Again, we see the speed to power. Again, we see the leverage and the deceleration here to throw a defender off and draw a foul. And like we keep showing, George's speed was truly insane for a guy his size. Obviously a great leaper and could get up in space. Similar play right here where he could just glide to the bucket. Great little drop-off pass right there for an open layup. But George was a very creative ball handler, and while his ball control was quite poor, which is true, he had the things that elite ball handling prospects have, which are creativity and elite movement skills, a willingness to string together moves and keep his hands alive deep into the paint. This is something I talk about plenty with prospects who are young handlers. Usually, most guys pick up the dribble right here, and Paul George might have been able to score or create an assist, but that extra dribble helps him get deep into the paint, draw all 5 defenders into the paint, and then make an easy drop-off pass to his teammate for a layup. I thought Paul George had some pretty solid vision as well. Nothing crazy as a passer, as a prospect, but certainly could make basic passes when, one, he had the speed he did to get downhill, and he could bend right here, split the pick and roll through a little gap right here and drop it off. And yes, the competition wasn't crazy, but I think George was routinely using or attempting to use his handle to create separation. Great little behind the back to change directions, get downhill, and doesn't score here. I think he had some technique issues as a finisher, but he's grabbing his offensive boards right there, and he ends up resetting the play. And even on the shots that don't go in, you just see the level of comfort that Paul George had at this stage as a shot creator. Like, this looks like peak Paul George, the kind of stuff that he does, right? Explode towards the middle, behind the back to force his defender into a Looney Tunes ass position, step back to create space for his mid-range jumper, and it just doesn't fall. But even though George's ball control was very inconsistent, which we'll get to, like, he had the creativity and just the sense and the feel as a scorer of how to use his handle. He had counters when defenses cut him off, and these are rare things, even considering the weaknesses that George had, which we'll get into. Great spin move there, and just gets blocked by the rim. Unfortunate possession right there for Paul George. Like I said, though, his ball control is really poor. And I think ball control is the part of handling that is very fixable. That can improve a lot as players get older. But I don't think the creativity, the dexterity, the movement was. But it was certainly true at that stage that George was not a reliable creator, especially against the better team he played on the ball, because he was just liable to lose the basketball. He drew a ton of offensive foul turnovers. Great job spinning back here, by the way, and getting to the middle, but he always like hop stepped, ran forward, and drew offensive fouls. So there was a level of kind of recklessness on drives that would certainly limit George at that time. This is a good example of some of the good and the bad. Like, you can see his handle is pretty high here, but he's able to keep the ball alive and create a decent look. His teammate doesn't end up shooting. If that was an NBA play, he generates his guy wide open three. Offense is going to run, and then we're going to finish this play with Paul George losing the ball on a drive, getting it back, losing it again, but it's a foul. So George's ball control at that point was certainly a problem, but I think people index on it way too much. I don't know why I have this clip here, but nice little face-up mid-range. I think I meant to have that clip later. But George wasn't always the best decision maker on these drives. I think that was one of his big issues. It wasn't necessarily that he couldn't create stuff. It's like, good job, getting to the left. He correctly reads that he should spin back into the middle. And instead of trying to continue this advantage, to use his size, to just go to the rim, he's like, I'm going to take a crazy, leaning spin move and get absolutely swatted. But I don't think it was a crazy issue that was unfixable or anything. George was a solid passer, as we said. I think players who are really good in the middle of zones is like a good heuristic I've talked about. And PG was a dominant scorer, of course, but could make these basic passes from the center of a zone, and he was a great offensive rebounder, cutter, playmaker. He just had a lot of the stuff that you'd want from a future star, and of course George was a ridiculous shooter and had an absolutely sparkling statistical profile where, just looking at the shooting his final year, 36% on really high volume, 90% from the line, good foul drawer, incredible block and steal rates, positive assist to turnover ratio, efficient on high usage, good BPM type stats, really high unassisted rates for his 2-pointers, especially 60-ish, 70-ish% unassisted for a wing at the rim is pretty awesome, especially one who is kind of considered not a creator, right? Yeah, he had some fall off in terms of his 3-point shooting against the better teams he played, but the sample here is so small, 28 games, and even though the free throw numbers normalized throughout his career, this is just an awesome sample, right? 40% on difficult shots, as we're going to get into right here. George with a little snatch through the legs, rise up for pull-up threes, and he had this really impressive off-ball feel that I talk about a ton in movement shooters and off-ball players, where George does a really good job right here feeling that this is the space on the court to lift into, and he could go this way. There's space over here, but that would be a much harder pass for the post-up player, and George just gets a warm-up shot right there, obviously because the defense was bad, but because he created it as well. And yeah, just the crazy hop jumpers that we've seen Paul George, and he had the range that you expect from NBA quality shooters. Just pull up from the parking lot, hop step into space. Like I said, he takes some ill-advised shots, maybe step back in the corner with 16 seconds on the clock, and the decision making wasn't great. But as I talked about plenty, I think that the shot selection and stuff can definitely improve, and his crazy shooting range really helped him as an off-ball player, a closeout driver, where George just hits a little pump fake up in the air, drive to the basket, hop off 2 feet, draw the foul for the and one. And George, this is where I meant to have the mid-range clip. Was an awesome mid-range shot maker as well. The efficiency was poor, but the volume and just the variety of attempts were most important. Where I like that Paul George, there's kind of a floppy action right here built into this play, where it looks like George could choose to maybe go this way and kind of try to come up for a three, but he does not necessarily a floppy action, just an action where he had the choice to go the other way. But George gets a face-up jumper, pulls up. That's an easy bucket for him. And I think this heuristic of these athletic ball handling wings is really good and something I look for when I'm scouting prospects. And it's the main reason I was really high on a guy like Elijah Freeman. I did a video on him. You should go watch that. 6'8", played in D2 last year, going to Auburn. Just a crazy handle for his size. It's inconsistent. He turns the ball over a lot now, but the change of direction, the smoothness, and the willing to try stuff as a 6'8" guy, just hesitations. head fakes, change of speed, getting to the basket. Like all of that makes me think he has a very bright future as a ball handler. Shelton Henderson, freshman going in Miami, he's like a 6'5", 6'6" power wing, but he has a much better handle than you'd think for his just physical profile. Oh my goodness. Against AJ DeBanza there, by the way, hesitating, getting right into that dunk and finishing strong. Really good job here by Henderson getting downhill because he has the great speed and athleticism, but he's also comfortable making crossover in and out moves. Great job getting to the middle right there and lobbing it up for a dunk to Hudson Greer, who I also think is going to be pretty good this year at Creighton. He had a great speed to power, kind of similar to what we looked at with Paul George. Not that Shelton Henderson is going to be Paul George. He can't shoot, which is a big part of the Paul George case, right? Beautiful power, but you can see the initial move that helped him get into his handle. And then another sleeper I like, who his main kind of feature to me offensively is his elite handle, is Dalen Swain, who's a junior at Texas, but I was too lazy to find new clips, and I had these AAU clips where this is the same now at Xavier, and that it's been, but he has a really deft and creative handle for a 6'8" guy. And even though Swain can't really shoot, I am interested in a long-term bet on him. But of course, back to Paul George, he was a phenomenal defensive prospect as well. Crazy impressive steals and blocks and just ability to shut stuff off. I'm going to find the defensive clips right here. As we saw before, 3% steal rate, 3% block rate is obviously excellent. George was picking people up full court like we see so much in the NBA today, but clearly had the athleticism and lateral quickness and the size to just be an awesome point of attack defender. Was great jumping passes for these pick sixes in full court open space. And yeah, you just really couldn't throw the ball near Paul George one pass away on these easy ones because of his incredible instincts. And he was always just making these highlight plays, stealing passes in midair. And look at this. Look at the move he's going to put on here, dunking the ball in transition. George, speaking of transition, was a murderous to chase down shot blocker. Absolutely crazy the shit that he did. Was a really good just help rim protector too in the half court. Could make a lot of really good plays. And just watch how George is going to teleport through this screen right here. Just stepping around it, getting right in front of the ball. And then George is going to be rewarded for his effort later in this play by stealing a pass to the interior. He wasn't always perfect in terms of his consistency. He would gamble at times, and his point of attack technique wasn't great. I don't think he was always good at getting low and in his stance. But these are defensive issues that I don't think are crazy problematic. Just like the ball control, like I said, as 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, even in college, tend to improve at a lot of the little technical stuff. But George had the things that you can't really teach. The ball handling promise, the incredible athleticism, the nuclear shooting. And obviously, like I said, we have the benefit of 15 plus years of hindsight with Paul George, right? Or almost 15 years of hindsight. But I go back and I watch this tape and I look at the statistical profile and compare it to some other guys in his class who went above him, like the Aminus and Wesley Johnsons. And even if those guys were great college players, the profile with George, from the stats to the ball handling to the athleticism to the shooting to the defense, it I don't know, seems like an obvious star prospect that I at least hope that I would have been high on if unnamed player with the exact same body and skills and stuff came into the league today. So let me know what you thought of this video. I thought it was really interesting, kind of like a little myth busting, but yeah, Paul George was an awesome prospect, and hope you have a great day.